Hey everyone, Steve Patterson here from Photoshop Essentials. In this video, I'll show you how to scale, rotate, flip, skew, distort, and warp images, all using the free transform command in Photoshop. We'll start with the basics and learn how to scale and rotate images using free transform. Then we'll look at more interesting transform options like skew, distort, and perspective. I'll show you how each one works and the best ways to use them. From there, we'll learn how to reshape images using Photoshop's warp mode, including how to create custom warps and how to select and edit preset warp shapes. And at the end, I'll show you how to get more useful results from Photoshop's standard rotate and flip commands, including how to create a 4-way mirror image effect. This video includes changes Adobe made to free transform as of Photoshop CC 2019. So for best results, you'll want to be using Photoshop CC and you'll want to make sure that your copy is up to date. Let's get started. To follow along, go ahead and open any image. I'll use this image that I downloaded from Adobe Stock. In the Layers panel, we see the image on the background layer. Photoshop lets us transform almost any type of layer, including pixel-based layers, type layers, shape layers, and even smart objects, which we'll look at in a moment. But one layer we can't transform is the background layer, and that's because the background layer is locked. Now the free transform command is found under the Edit menu in the menu bar. But if I try to select it, we see that it's grayed out. To fix that, you can unlock the background layer by clicking the lock icon. And now if we go back up to the Edit menu, we see Free Transform ready to be selected. The only problem now is that if I select Free Transform, and then I scale my image smaller by clicking and dragging one of the handles, I end up with a checkerboard pattern behind the image. The checkerboard pattern is how Photoshop represents transparency, and the reason we're seeing transparency is because I currently have no other layers below my image. So to fix that, I'll add a new layer. First, I'll press the Escape key on my keyboard to cancel the free transform command without saving my changes. Then I'll click the New Fill or Adjustment Layer icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, and I'll choose a solid color fill layer. These are great to use for backgrounds because it's easy to choose any color you need from the color picker. I'll keep things simple and choose white, and then I'll click OK. Back in the Layers panel, I'll drag the fill layer below the image. Then I'll click on the image layer to select it. And this time, if I go back to the Edit menu and choose Free Transform, and then I scale the image smaller, we see the white background from the fill layer instead of transparency. Again, I'll press the Escape key on my keyboard to cancel my changes. Before we look at all the ways to transform images, there's one more important topic we need to cover, and that's the difference between destructive and non-destructive transformations. Each time we scale, rotate, or in some way transform a pixel-based layer, we lose image quality. That's because Photoshop needs to redraw the pixels every time. And this is known as a destructive edit because we're making permanent changes to the image. But we can avoid losing quality by first converting the layer into a smart object. Smart objects are like containers that protect the image inside them. Any transformations we apply to a smart object are applied to the smart object itself, while the image inside it remains unharmed. And each time we apply a new transformation, Photoshop redraws the smart object based on that original image data. In other words, every transformation we apply is like we're applying it for the first time. And no matter how many times we transform a smart object, the result always looks great. Now, you don't have to convert your layer into a smart object, but I would highly recommend it. All you need to do is right-click or control-click on a Mac on the layer in the Layers panel and choose Convert to Smart Object. An icon appears in the lower right of the preview thumbnail telling us that the layer is now inside a smart object, and we're ready to start transforming the image. So, which types of transformations can we apply? Well, all of Photoshop's transform options can be accessed by going up to the Edit menu and choosing Transform. From here, we can choose to scale or rotate the image. We can skew it, perform distort and perspective distortions, and even warp the image. We also have standard options for rotating the image clockwise or counterclockwise, and we can flip the image horizontally or vertically. But while you can keep coming back here to select these different options, there's really no point. That's because all of Photoshop's transform commands can be accessed using a single command known as free transform. You can select free transform from here in the edit menu, but a much faster way is to use the keyboard shortcut, Control-T or Command-T on a Mac. Even if you don't like keyboard shortcuts, this one is definitely worth knowing. As soon as you select free transform, you'll see the transform box and handles around the image. There's a handle on the top, bottom, left, and right, plus one in each corner. Now, depending on your image, you may find that the default color of the transform box makes it hard to see. And if that's the case, you can choose a different color. First, press the Escape key on your keyboard to cancel free transform. Then open Photoshop's Preferences. On a Windows PC, go up to the Edit menu. On a Mac, go up to the Photoshop CC menu. From there, choose Preferences, and then choose Guides, Grid, and Slices. Down at the bottom of the dialog box is an option called Control Color, and this is the current color of the transform box. The default color is a light blue, but you can click on the option and choose a different color from the list. Or you can choose Classic Mode, which is very easy to see because it displays a dark outline over light areas of the image and a light outline over dark areas. I'll choose Classic. Once you've chosen a color, click OK to close the Preferences dialog box. And the next time you open Free Transform, you'll see the new color. So let's look at all the ways we can transform images using Photoshop's Free Transform command, starting with Scale. To scale an image, just click and drag any of the handles. As of Photoshop CC 2019, the default behavior of Free Transform is to scale images proportionally. So no matter which handle you drag, you'll scale the image with the aspect ratio locked in place. To scale non-proportionally, hold Shift as you drag a handle. But here's a problem you may run into. If you try to go back to scaling the image proportionally again by dragging a handle without holding Shift, notice that Photoshop does not reset the aspect ratio. Instead, we're locked into this new aspect ratio. To restore the original aspect ratio, you'll need to go up to the Options bar and click the link icon between the width and height fields. And now we're back to the original shape of the image, and we can then scale it proportionally. You can move an image around inside the canvas by clicking and dragging inside the Free Transform box. I'll move mine into the center. And to scale an image from its center, rather than from the opposite side or corner, press and hold the Alt key or the Option key on a Mac as you drag a handle. To scale non-proportionally from the center, add the Shift key. So that's Shift-Alt or Shift-Option on a Mac. I'll scale my image a bit larger. And then, if you're happy with the size of the image and you have no other transform commands to apply, you can accept your changes and close Free Transform by clicking the check mark in the Options bar. Or you can press the Enter key on your keyboard or the Return key on a Mac. If you converted your image to a smart object, as I showed you how to do earlier, then it's easy to restore the original size of your image even after you've scaled it and closed Free Transform. First, press Control-T or Command-T on a Mac to reselect Free Transform. Then, notice in the Options bar that the width and height fields are both showing values less than 100%. In my case, I'm seeing a value of just under 56% for both the width and height. Because we're working with a smart object, Photoshop knows that the original image inside the smart object is larger than the scaled size. So to restore the original size, all we need to do is change the width and height values back to 100%. And now the image is back to its original size, and with no loss in quality. I didn't really want to do that, so to cancel Free Transform without saving your changes, click the Cancel button in the Options bar, or press the Escape key on your keyboard. Next, let's look at how to rotate an image with Free Transform. I'll press Control-T or Command-T on a Mac to select the Free Transform command. Then to rotate the image, move your mouse cursor outside the free transform box. Your cursor will change into a curved double-sided arrow. Click and drag to rotate the image to any angle you need. Or to limit the rotation to increments of 15 degrees, hold your Shift key as you drag. To switch back to rotating freely, release the Shift key. Be careful that you don't move your mouse cursor too far away from the image. If you do, the rotation icon will change into an arrow, and if you click with the arrow, you'll accept your changes and close Free Transform. This is a new feature as of Photoshop CC 2019, but it also makes it easy to close Free Transform by mistake. If that happens, just go up to the Edit menu and choose Undo Free Transform, or press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z on a Mac. Then press Ctrl-T or Command-T to reselect Free Transform and rotate the image again. Along with dragging your mouse to rotate the image, you can also enter a value directly into the Angle option in the Options bar. Positive values will rotate the image clockwise, and negative values rotate it counterclockwise. To reset the angle at any time, just enter 0. Before Photoshop CC 2019 came along, the Free Transform box included a target icon in the center. The target icon is known as the reference point because it marks the center of the transformation. We'll look at what that means in a moment. But for whatever reason, Adobe decided to hide the reference point in the most recent version of Photoshop. It's still there, but we can't see it unless we turn it on. And you can do that by going up to the Options bar and clicking the Toggle Reference Point checkbox. Then look in the center of the Free Transform box and you'll see the target icon. Earlier, when we scaled the image from its center by holding Alt or Option on a Mac and dragging a handle, what we were really doing was scaling the image from that reference point. I'll press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z on a Mac to undo that. But we don't need to leave the reference point in the center. We can move it just by dragging the target icon to a different spot. I'll drag it up onto the tip of the butterfly's wing. And now if I press and hold Alt or Option on a Mac and I drag a handle, I'm scaling the image around the wing. Again, I'll press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z to undo that. And if I rotate the image now rotates around the wing. A faster way to move the reference point is to press and hold your Alt or Option key on a Mac and simply click on the spot where you want the target icon to appear. I'll click to move the reference point onto this antenna. And now if I rotate the image, I'm rotating it around that new point. And one more way to move the reference point is by using the reference point grid in the Options bar. Each outer square in the grid represents one of the handles around the transform box. So if I click on the square in the upper left, the target icon jumps to the upper left handle. And if I click on the square in the bottom right, it moves to the handle in the bottom right. To center the reference point, click on the square in the center. As you can probably guess, the reference point is very useful, so I'm not sure why Adobe has decided to hide it, but you can turn it on permanently from Photoshop's preferences. If Free Transform is active, press the Escape key on your keyboard to close it. Then on a Windows PC, go up to the Edit menu. On a Mac, go up to the Photoshop CC menu. From there, choose Preferences, and then Tools. Select the option that says Show Reference Point when using Transform. Then click OK to close the dialog box. So far, we've looked at how to scale and rotate an image with Free Transform, but what about Photoshop's other transform commands that we saw under the Edit menu, like Skew, Distort, Perspective, and Warp? I'll press Ctrl-T or Command-T to select the Free Transform command, and with Free Transform active, that same menu of options can be accessed by right-clicking or control-clicking on a Mac inside the Free Transform box, so you can quickly choose the one you need. Let's look at the next three commands after Scale and Rotate, starting with Skew. With Skew selected, click on either the top or bottom handle and drag to skew the image left or right. Here I'm dragging the top handle to skew the image. I'll press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z on a Mac to undo that. And we can do the same thing with the bottom handle by dragging it left or right. We can also drag a side handle to skew the image up or down. And to skew both sides of the image at once, press and hold Alt or Option on a Mac as you drag. This works with the side handles and with the top and bottom handles as well. So that's how to skew an image. Now let's look at how to distort an image. Right-click or Control-click inside the Free Transform box and choose Distort from the list. Then click and drag any of the corner handles. You can drag each corner handle in any direction, and each one can be moved independently from the others. The only problem is that Photoshop only gives us one level of undo when using Free Transform. So if I try to undo my changes by pressing Ctrl-Z or Command-Z on a Mac, I can only undo that last change I made. No matter how many times I press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z, I can't go back any further, which means that if you want to revert back to the original shape of your image, you'll need to press the Escape key on your keyboard to cancel and close Free Transform. I'll press Ctrl-T or Command-T to open Free Transform again so we can look at a different type of distortion known as perspective. I'll right-click or Control-click on a Mac, and I'll choose Perspective from the list. The difference between Distort and Perspective is that Distort lets us move each corner handle independently, but Perspective moves the opposite corner at the same time, in the opposite direction. If I click and drag the top left corner to the right, the top right corner moves to the left. And if I drag back to the left, the other corner moves to the right. I'll press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z to undo that. And if I drag the top left corner down, the bottom left corner moves up, and the same thing happens in the opposite direction. And that's how to use the Skew, Distort, and Perspective commands. But the problem with selecting these commands from the menu, like we've been doing, is that the commands are sticky, meaning that you're locked into that one command and can't do anything else unless you choose a different command. So, for example, right now I'm in perspective mode, but let's say I want to drag the right side of the image in towards the left so that the image is not so wide, which means I need to scale it. I'll press and hold my Shift key so that I'm scaling non-proportionally, but when I try to click and drag the handle, nothing happens. Scaling doesn't work. The same is true if I try to rotate the image. I'll move my cursor outside the Free Transform box, but when I click and drag to rotate it, again, nothing happens. And it's all because I'm locked into perspective mode. To scale the image, I first need to right-click or Control-click inside the Free Transform box and then choose the Scale command. Then I can hold my Shift key to scale non-proportionally and drag the side handle inward. But I still can't rotate the image, and that's because I'm now locked into scale mode. To rotate it, I need to right-click or Control-click and choose Rotate. And now I can click and drag to rotate it around. So as you can see, choosing commands from the menu like this can get pretty tedious. So here's a better way to work. Anytime Free Transform is active, you can temporarily switch to the Skew, Distort, or Perspective modes using keyboard shortcuts. To skew an image while in Free Transform, press and hold the Control key or the Command key on a Mac, and then click and drag the top, bottom, or side handles. Notice though that you can also drag the handle around freely, which is not something you can normally do with the Skew command. To limit the direction to just horizontal or vertical, add the Shift key. So that's Shift Alt or Shift Option on a Mac. And to skew both sides at once, add the Alt or Option key. So here I'm holding Control or Command to skew the image, the Shift key to limit the direction to horizontal or vertical, and the Alt or Option key to skew both sides at once. To distort the image while in Free Transform, again press and hold the Control or Command key on your keyboard, and then click and drag a corner handle. So holding Control or Command and dragging a top, bottom, or side handle lets you skew the image, and holding the same key while dragging a corner handle lets you distort the image. To limit the direction to horizontal or vertical, add the Shift key. So that's Shift-Control or Shift-Command on a Mac. And to switch to perspective mode while in Free Transform, press and hold all three modifier keys, so Shift-Control-Alt or Shift-Command-Option on a Mac, and drag a corner handle. And the nice thing about these keyboard shortcuts is that when you release the keys, you switch back to Free Transform, so there's no need to select other commands from a menu. If I want to scale the right side inward, I can just hold Shift to scale non-proportionally and then drag the handle to the left. And to rotate it, I just need to move my cursor outside the Free Transform box and then drag. So again, using those keyboard shortcuts is the best way to select Skew, Distort, or Perspective when you need them. Of all the transform commands in Photoshop, the most powerful one is Warp. One way to select it is to right-click or Control-click on a Mac and choose Warp from the menu. But a faster way is to click the Warp icon in the Options bar. You'll know you're in Warp mode because the Warp Transform box divides the image into a 3x3 grid. So let's look at all the ways to warp the image, beginning with the grid itself. If you click and drag inside the center grid box, you'll reshape the area in the center without affecting the outer shape or the aspect ratio. I'll press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z to undo that. You can also click and drag in the outer grid boxes to reshape the contents along with the overall shape. You can drag a corner point to move the corners around, just like if you were using the Distort command. And notice that if you drag over the image, you'll see what looks like the back of the image, which is pretty neat. I'll move my other corner points around, even though I'm not creating anything specific here. We're just seeing how things work. And notice that each corner point also has two directional handles, or control points, extending out from it. You can drag each handle to change the angle of the curve, and you can drag the handles shorter or longer to change the length of the curve. I'll drag this right handle over to the right to try and match the other side, and maybe I'll drag this bottom handle inward. And I'll do the same thing with the other side. When we warp images like this, it's known as a custom warp. And if we look at the Warp Presets option in the Options bar, it's set to Custom. But if you click on the option, you'll see a list of preset shapes that you can choose from. Each one will warp the image into a different shape, but they all behave the same way. To see how they work, I'll choose the first one in the list, Arc. And as soon as I select it, Photoshop warps the image into this arc shape. Unlike the custom warp mode, which places handles in each corner, the preset shapes give us just one handle, and it's used to control the amount of bend in the shape. For most shapes, the bend handle is found somewhere along the top, like it is here, but a few of them place it at the bottom or somewhere in the middle. To adjust the bend, just click and drag the handle. And if you drag down far enough, you'll bend the shape in the opposite direction. Along with dragging the handle, you can also adjust the bend value from the Options bar. Just click and hold on the word Bend, and then drag left or right to adjust the value using the Scrubby slider. Or you can enter a value directly. And if you enter a negative value, you'll bend the shape in the opposite direction. You can change the orientation of the shape between vertical and horizontal by clicking the orientation icon. And you can even add some horizontal or vertical distortion. To distort the shape horizontally, click and hold on the H, and then drag left or right to increase or decrease the value. Positive values will make the right side taller than the left, and negative values make the left side taller than the right. And to distort it vertically, click and hold on the letter V, and then drag left or right. If I increase the vertical distortion, the image looks like it's tilting backwards. Or I can add some negative distortion as well. To clear the distortion, just set both values back to 0. I'm also going to reset the bend option back to its default value of 50. Then I'll try a different preset shape, like fish. Even though it's a different shape, it still behaves the same way as the other shape. We have a bend handle that we can drag to adjust the bend amount or to bend the shape in the other direction. You can change the orientation of the shape by clicking the orientation icon, and so on. But if you need more control over editing the shape, you can always switch back to the Custom mode by clicking the Warp Presets option and choosing Custom. This brings back the grid, the corner handles, and the direction handles that we looked at earlier. In my case, the top and bottom direction handles are extending off the screen. And if that happens, just go up to the View menu and choose Fit on Screen. Then you can edit the shape any way you like. I'll drag the top handle down to adjust the curve along the top of the shape, and I'll drag the bottom handle up to adjust the curve along the bottom. To clear the warp and return to the original shape of the image, set the Warp Presets option to None. I'll zoom back in on my image by pressing Ctrl+ or Command+ on a Mac a couple of times. And to switch from Warp mode back to Free Transform, click again on the Warp icon in the Options bar. And now we're back to the standard Free Transform box and handles. So at this point, we've learned how to scale and rotate images, how to skew and distort them, how to apply perspective distortions, and how to warp images. But if you right-click or Control-click on a Mac inside the Free Transform box, you'll find two more sets of commands at the bottom. One is for rotating the image, either 180 degrees or 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise, and the other is for flipping the image horizontally or vertically. And on their own, these commands are pretty straightforward. But we can combine these commands with the transformation reference point that we looked at earlier to get more interesting results. For example, let's learn how to use them to quickly create a four-way mirror image effect. I'm going to scale my image a bit smaller by dragging the top left corner handle inward. And then I'll drag the image over to the right side of the canvas so that the left side of the image aligns with the vertical center. I'll accept it and close Free Transform by pressing Enter or Return on a Mac. To create a mirror version of the image, I'll need a copy of it. So with the image layer selected in the Layers panel, I'll press Ctrl-J or Command-J on a Mac to make a copy. Next, I'll press Ctrl-T or Command-T to select Free Transform. But before I flip the image, I'll click on the reference point in the center and I'll drag it over to the handle on the left. So now the left edge of the image will be the center of the transformation. Then to flip the image, I'll right-click or Control-click inside the Free Transform box and I'll choose Flip Horizontal. And just like that, we've created our first mirror image effect. I'll press Enter or Return on a Mac to accept it. But let's take it a step further and make mirrored versions of both of these images. Back in the Layers panel, I'll press and hold my Shift key and I'll click on the original image layer to select both layers at once. Then I'll select the Move tool from the toolbar. In the Options bar, I'll deselect the Auto Select Layer option so that I can move both images at once. And then I'll click and drag both images up into the top half of the canvas until the bottom of the images align with the horizontal center. I'll need a copy of the images to use for the mirrored versions, so with both layers selected, I'll again press Ctrl-J or Command-J on a Mac, and the copies appear above the originals. I'll press Ctrl-T or Command-T to place the Free Transform box around both images, and notice that you can transform more than one layer at a time. And since I want to flip these images horizontally, I'll click on the reference point in the center and I'll drag it down onto the bottom handle. Finally, I'll right-click or Control-click inside the Free Transform box and I'll choose Flip Vertical. Photoshop flips the images around that reference point, creating our four-way mirror image effect. To accept it, I'll press Enter or Return on a Mac. And there we have it. That's all the ways to transform images using the Free Transform command in Photoshop. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you found it helpful, please consider liking it, sharing it, and subscribing to my channel. You can also visit my website, PhotoshopEssentials.com, where you'll find hundreds of Photoshop tutorials. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. I'm Steve Patterson from PhotoshopEssentials.com.